have we in the United States of America ever debated tariffs before? Could one say that this has been a national conversation before? Actually, it has. It was very much a lead component in the lead up to the Civil War. We're going to talk about that today on Further Every Day. Also, in addition to repeating history, let's talk about when you divorce yourself from God. What happens to your government? What happens to your sexuality? What happens to your marriages? Let's talk about that. Also, the war that the birds won and the Great Divorce. So it's going to be fun. Miss Nicki, how are you today?
I am good. How are you?
Doing all right. So Jonathan Fiala sitting in the chair of philosophy. To my right, I've got Miss Nicki in the chair of theology.
Yes.
Upstream of philosophy, to my left. Downstream of philosophy, it informs our culture. We got Charlie.
And I want to hear more about the birds winning.
We're going to have fun about the birds winning. The birds won a war. And
Not the birds and the bees.
Not the birds and the bees.
Just the birds.
I'm not going to say this is a kid's show, but we try to keep it from going too blue here. Like we really do.
Well,
we try to censor out everything.
He mentioned sexuality. I just want to make it clear.
Well, the birds and the bees definitely will be grazed over today. Good thing Steve is late because he'd have a field day with that. He's going to be in politics in just a couple minutes. And we got Rai, the producer guy, in the producer's chair. How's it going, bro?
It's going good. How are you, John Arthur?
Good. Glad to have you producing as always. So, guys, if you are watching on our YouTube, Rumble, or if you're listening in, hundreds of thousands of downloads on the audio. Thank you, guys. We are honored for that. We are live on PSB from 1 to 3 Central Standard Time, God's time zone, every Sunday. So we are blessed to be here, and you can drop live chat here. So let's get into it. Have you ever heard of Hamilton's report on manufacturing?
No.
So this is kind of the first, I'd say, really strong bit of documentation of what our founding fathers thought about protectionist ideas, i.e. tariffs, and maintaining the nation's own ability to manufacture in-house. And like I said before, this was largely the cause of the Civil War, and it's the same people for the same reasons today. We'll get to it. But I actually kind of want to dig into Hamilton's report in 1791 is when he presented this to the Congress. And it wasn't, his suggestions weren't adopted, but later on, they weren't adopted at 1791, but later on they were indeed taken. And this is a lot of our tariff policy that funded the United States of America for quite some time. So, Mr. Producer, if you can go ahead and throw cut one, we're going to go ahead and read a little bit of his report. Not only the wealth, but the independence and security of a country appear to be materially connected with the prosperity of manufacturers. Every nation, with a view to those great objects, ought to endeavor to possess within itself all the essentials of a national supply. These comprise the means of subsistence, habitation, clothing, and defense. The more things change, the more they stay the same. So for those of you who are saying, how do I defend this issue? The tariffs is something that I don't really want to defend as a Christian. You know, I get asked, as a Christian guy, you get asked all the time, how can you possibly suggest a protectionist policy? You need to give the people in Thailand and in China and all these other places jobs. Or how could you, as a Christian conservative, how could you possibly look at America first? Well, there are consequences. We don't live in a bubble. There are a number of different cause and effect relations that are in play here. And today I kind of want to lay this out because, again, this is an apologetics channel, but because politics has merged so deeply into our personal lives because we don't have a good theology, we didn't think very well about what we're doing, no good philosophy, our culture and politics are totally hackneyed. They're all messed up. So what Hamilton is articulating here, if you have all of your supply lines in China, foreign adversary, and they decide that they're going to release there's going to be a worldwide pandemic and everything shuts down, then what happens to that nation that that depends on supplies for medicine, steel, aluminum, all of your, by the way, a lot of our cellulose comes from China. What's cellulose used for? Primers for ammunition. A lot of our rare earth materials and minerals come from China. We could mine those here. Now, we've chosen not to for a lot of reasons. But the reason Trump's trying to bring that back is twofold. A, he wants a fair, it's very clear he's not a true protectionist. That much has been made clear over the last month. He's not a true protectionist, but he is trying to level the playing field and trying to shore up something here. Hamilton says it's essential for a nation, for the defense. Now, who opposed this? Actually, the largest opponent of this was Madison. The largest well-known opponent was Madison. Now, why would Madison oppose this?
And that's a really good question. I'm not coming up with a very good answer.
It's because his income depended upon slavery.
So
at cheap labor, you can't compete. You can't compete if you have that imbalance offset, the cheap labor and the cheap goods being processed back and forth. He wanted tariff barriers low. And that is what started to set us up towards the Civil War. I'll tease that more in a moment, but Steve, get in here. Steve just got here.
So the interesting thing about all this, when you think about Congress today, what is one of the biggest beefs that people have with people serving in Congress? And that is they are making money in the stock market because of their advanced knowledge on things.
Yep.
And they vote on things that will benefit their pockets as opposed to benefiting the pockets of their constituents. A lot of cases to be made for that. So I'm not here to argue that one way or the other right now. What I am here to say though is this, that when it comes to the tariff issue, when it comes to the Make America Great Again issue, Donald Trump did not say make America the greatest again.
To the detriment of other people.
That's right.
I think it's where you're going.
Yeah. When you say he's not a true protectionist, I agree with that.
He doesn't want an absolutist protection.
That's
because
right.
You see, he immediately rolled out Apple and
That's
Samsung
right.
and a number of other exceptions. So it's very clear that he's interested in a couple things.
Yep.
He wants fair trade barriers. He doesn't.
That's the big one.
He doesn't want the American public, the American worker, to be competing with slave labor.
That is a right thing.
That's the issue. And the same people who were pushing back against this in the 1700s and the 1800s, we fought a civil war over it. Ultimately, and I say the same people, obviously you didn't have the Democrat and Republican Party, you had the Tories, the Whigs, the Federalists, the Anti-Federalists, and you had all these factions. But as things shook out in Hamilton's and Madison's lifetime, you saw Andrew Jackson as presidency, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But Andrew Jackson was a Democrat all through and through, and we'll kind of get into that. But for now, let's go ahead and real quick, Steve.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
Doing okay.
You're just doing okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm doing okay.
I'm going to let you share as much or as little as you want. But yeah, I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Yep. And
So-
I was going to say one more thing on the tariffs. A lot of people are not, they don't see the detail in this. Could we effectively get rid of taxes, income taxes, paid to the IRS through tariffs?
Absolutely. That's the way it was run before.
The unequivocal answer to that is yes.
Yep.
And if people would just step back for a moment, by the way, I'm a free market guy. I am all about free market. So you sell it for what you can get.
Yep.
If somebody goes somewhere else and gets it cheaper, that's their business. Is it worth the quality? Maybe not. Maybe it is. I'm a free market guy.
Here's where I become protectionalist. I think protectionalism gives you the opportunity to balance the lever towards freer and fairer and more prosperous countries.
And I can't disagree with that.
Because China, we should have put the screws to them.
Absolutely.
We should never have let them into the world.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately, we're doing the same thing in that we did with slave trade. We've just exported the slave trade to China, by and large, for manufacturing, which we'll get to in a moment.
Say that again.
We've exported the slave trade to China. I've been saying that for years. The whole woke
Yes.
thing, when the first really big BLM during Barack Obama's presidency, I always said, you buy stuff at Walmart. What right? You made in China, made by a nice little Timmy Ho, who's 5 years old working in a sweatshop. You have no right to complain about what your ancestors did or what my ancestors did 400 years ago, 200 years ago. You have no right when you are buying made in China.
And by the way, Sam Walton did not sell stuff from China when he started his store. It was all American made.
Correct. So I absolutely despise and detest the woke movement for what it's taken away. Look, over militarization of police, we're going to talk about that today. When you divorce yourself from God, what happens to your government? What happens to your religious freedom? When you, but BLM, the woke movement, took away the conversation of, we could be talking about artisanal miners in the Congo that China is basically exploiting, and we are by proxy through China exploiting. We could be talking about that, but instead we're talking about Black Lives Matter in, hands up, don't shoot, which didn't happen. The guy was actually reaching for Darren's gun, right? So Officer Darren's gun. That whole miasma is of we all know that there's something wrong with the police in America. We all know that there are some problems. Largely I support the police. We're going to talk about some police I don't support today. Okay, I can't just say back the blue. There are some blue that don't need to be backed. That they are a problem. But we've taken all of that away because of the woke noise. Yeah. And instead, it's so distracting from the truth. And we'll get to that. But for now, Hamilton's report on manufacturing, for those of you just joining us, cut number 2, Mr. Producer. The spirit of enterprise, useful and prolific as it is, must necessarily be contracted or expanded in proportion to the simplicity or variety of occupations and productions which are to be found in a society. It must be less in a nation of mere cultivators than in a nation of cultivators and merchants, less in a nation of cultivators and merchants than in a nation of cultivators, artificers, and merchants. What he's saying is you have a general pool of knowledge when you have a country. We have a community. You have a town, and that town has 5,000 people in there. And they all have different jobs. They all have a general pool of knowledge. But the more diverse, if they're all working for Silicon Valley and you have no mechanics, you're not going to have a general pool of knowledge that is going to improve those who are in the auto industry, right? And the same with textiles. If it's just a tech city, as a nation, let's zoom out. And cities and towns specialize. That is natural. Even nations, to an extent, specialize. But what Hamilton's saying is the more diversity you have in mentality, again, there goes the diversity of mentality, opinion, of thought, as opposed to artificial diversity. When you have that diversity of talents and workmanship and craftsmanship, you have new discoveries that are made, and you have a more robust economy. You have a more robust civilization. To protect that, you need to make sure that if you have free trade, it must be fair trade. It must at least be fair trade. Now, our founding fathers were even more protectionist than I'm kind of towards funding off tariffs. Okay, I'm kind of sort of leaning that direction. I like that. I know it's a tax on Americans. I understand, but in a way, it also funnels and builds the economy. However, Trump is more moderate than that.
Yeah, but that tax is now paid based on what you're consuming.
Correct. It's now a consumption tax.
It's not an expected thing off your labor.
Correct. So it is a consumption tax, which again is, I think, in some ways better. It's a consumption when you're consuming outside of your own economy. Yep. So I lean very favorably to this, and that's how our nation was founded. The whole income tax thing was something that was done in the 19-teens, and it's an amendment, but it is repugnant to the Constitution. It should never have been put in place. But moving forward, next slide, Mr. Producer. To cherish and to stimulate the activity of the human mind by multiplying the objects of enterprise is not among the least considerable of expedients by which the wealth of a nation may be promoted, saying that you're going to be more wealthy with more robust, more diversity in your manufacturing processes. Even things in themselves not positively advantageous sometimes become so by their tendency to provoke exertion. Every new scene which is open to the busy nature of man to rouse and exert itself is the addition of a new energy to the general stock of effort. The more innovators you have, the more innovation you create as a nation. So we need to make sure that we protect our own innovations. Whenever there's something that could be made in America, we need to consider. And again, Trump is so much more moderate than I am. Trump is only saying, if you're using slave labor, if you're pumping your currency up or down and you're manipulating the currency. That's what we're looking at. So when people say, how could you possibly, as a Christian or as a conservative, support something that is so disastrous, scare quotes for those of you on audio, as the tariff war? It's more than that. And the thing that no one's talking about, it's a moral issue. I say moral issue. If you're sharp, you've already caught on to what I'm saying. Let me go one step further. Cut number 4, Mr. Producer. This is an argument we've had before. And again, in the tariff of 1828, they call it the tariff of abominations. You had the South become very, very upset with the manufacturing North. It was an issue of protectionism for the, thank you, Mr. Producer, for the northern factories, but the protectionism didn't protect the South. And there were a number of goods that the South needed to be able to continue to be profitable. And it's a complex issue. And many historians who are much smarter than I have spilt a lot of ink on this. But you see here a rift that opened in America. It was between the conservative North and the Democratic South. Mr. Producer, this is a political cartoon in the South, cut number 5. This is, again, they're talking about the death of the South, the death of industry. They considered it a big deal that the tariffs were affecting their ability to use cheap labor. Thank you, Mr. Producer. It's the same people. And you've heard the argument that the meme runs about, well, if we don't have the slaves, who's going to pick our cotton? Well, if we don't have the immigrants, who's going to pick our cotton? If we don't have the Chinese, the cheap free trade, and again, all these conservatives and none of the neocons talk about this. All these conservatives who say they have conservative values, I rarely hear them bring up the issue of how can an American market compete with slave trade? 1, 2, how can American market be moral and continue to buy sweatshop labor, often that is moderated at the end of the barrel of a gun? And if you think I'm being extreme, try to leave some of these countries.
Try
to leave some of these countries.
Yep.
Right? So I don't know. Miss Nicki, I know you have thoughts.
Well, it's really a sad thing because we all want to save money. And most people are Walmart shoppers because that's where you get the cheapest deal. But because it's so far away, you don't think about the people who actually have to make these, and one of the things that is true is that Trump wants to bring back manufacturing into the United States. Now, we have a history in manufacturing, and some of it's not good because let's go back to the 1800s where the employees were treated like slave labor and dangerous situations. And then you had unions, which were a good idea at the time. It was a really good idea to protect the workers. I support that. But then you have people, who got really greedy.
Well, you had the corruption and the collusion between government representatives and the unions. And so the purpose of the union wasn't inherently wrong.
No, it's not. Not at all.
It's actually a noble purpose built in there.
But you get people who lead it think, well, we can get more money. And
Correct.
Then the product becomes unable to sell in the United States because it's too expensive.
Correct.
So those people take those industries overseas.
And I just to tag on with that's all very good there. The other problem too that arises is when it comes to voting. Now you've got union leaders that are telling you how to vote.
Yes.
You're not voting. You're not allowed to quote unquote vote.
You can't break the rank.
Well,
That's right.
And when Obama was in office, remember they wanted to expose who voted
Yes.
against the union.
Yeah.
And what was that introducing? Why would you want to do that? What was the purpose behind that?
So when you look at it's funny we're onto this topic and everything. If you take a look at the approval rating for the Democrats right now, where is it? And it's in the toilet. It's there's not even water in the toilet. That's how bad it is. And I thought about something while you were sharing those thoughts on some of Madison and whatnot. When you think about how the Democrats respond to people and diversity of ideas, you're not allowed to be diverse.
No.
Correct.
You told their
You
line,
toe the line.
or you're out.
Because
And
it's a
now look
religious
at where
cult.
they're at.
Yeah.
Yes, but and now this is Pomeroy opinion here. I don't see them getting back into the White House. I don't see them getting into taking over the Senate again. I don't see them taking over Congress for another 10 to 15 years.
Careful. That's
Yeah.
what,
Well,
that's what we
but-
said for Bush.
Well,
Be careful.
Yeah, but you want to know something?
It is a different animal.
It's a much different animal because of Trump.
Well, it's
He's introduced ideas, and he has shown in this election that he can bring a coalition of diverse people together
Well, yeah,
for the
and-
common good of the country.
and the Democratic Party. The issue they're having is the split. Some of them are too woke for Democrats, and so I just read an article the other day about a long-term Democrat who said, "I am no longer part of this party. I'm independent. I can't go that far." And let me just say this, which was in the news about 2 weeks ago. A young female congresswoman from Texas who said,
Jasmine Crockett.
"Yeah, we're not picking." She made a statement that
We're
I
not
go
picking the
around
cotton.
and I have to educate people on immigration. And her words were, "We have these robust immigrants, and let's just face it, we're not picking cotton anymore."
Stop.
Yep. That's
So that
incredible.
means, Jasmine, now you're so well off, you're going to make other people pick your cotton.
you're going to oppress another group.
Thank you.
And that's the
Exactly.
that's the whole thought. And that's the concern is that it's the same people, it's the same mentality. Some people have become part of the oppressors from the oppressed class. You have African Americans, you have Italians, you have Jews, who all of whom in different times at different levels, okay, just different levels, have been persecuted for their race. And you have a lot of these people who are aligning themselves with the Democrat Party. And I just don't understand how, because it's the same party. There was never a switch. That never happened. And that's the thing that just disgusts me.
It's a lie.
And then they turn around and oppress others
Correct.
after being oppressed. Or
And-
should I say, their ancestors
Correct.
were oppressed.
Correct, because they bought into the ideology. Now, this is Crafty Fox asked this question. Again, if you are one of our regular listeners on the iTunes store, or if you're on Rumble or YouTube, we are live 1 to 3 Central Standard Time on Sundays. On Vaughn.live here, I got one from Crafty Fox. If there are no federal income taxes, what does that look like on a state and local level? Well, there are a couple of ways that was handled.
Great question.
You'd have state level tariffs, and you'd have also state level income taxes. But the federal tax, depending on, but here's the beautiful thing: if it's kicked back to the states, we can now experiment. And this is where my real frustration comes in with the current state of Congress. California is a failed experiment.
Oh, man.
But they keep getting money from the rest of us, so that has to stop. But the theory is that you can have failed experiments and successful experiments and see who's where. The thing is we have to curb the overall size of the government, which Doge is doing, and we're going in the right direction. But you would have that at the local level.
And
And
let's
that's the
give a
important thing.
Yeah. Let's give a real prime example of that. You saw the fires out in California this last few months. What did Trump say? You're not getting any more money because you folks, I told you back when I was in office the first time that you needed to clean up these policies and do such things. Well, okay. Let's go back to the original question of how do we do this with local tax money and whatnot. This is an example where one state does it this way, another state does it that way. Which one is doing it better? Let's both do it this way. Governor of Mississippi this last week. Big deal that was made about this. They ranked 4th from last in 4th grade reading. This was about 10 to 15 years ago. Over the course of 10 years, they are now in the middle of the pack in America. I'm talking in the 20s. Now, what happened there? Did anybody else pay attention to that?
So what did he say? Because I saw the article, but I didn't read it.
They got back to some basics. If I'm not mistaken, they introduced phonics back in. They did a couple of other things, but they weren't major adjustments. they were adjustments that were, I'm going to call it common sense. And it worked.
Go figure.
But that's right. But you'll get people like in your blue states that look at something like that and they'll go, no, that's just
there's
aberration.
and you're always going to have people who are caught up in ideology and they don't care what the results are. The ideology is more important
Then the results. Because it's
which
a
is tragic.
religion.
And I do want to share one thing here because everybody who knows who Mike Rowe is,
Yeah.
Dirty Jobs, he's very familiar with blue collar workers. And he had a good point. So we bring back manufacturing to the United States. His thing is, are we going to get people to work?
People have to be willing to do the job.
And because he's already making, warning people that there may be, I think that for every, is it 5 plumbers that leave the business, only 2 rise up to take over, 2 or 3. So there's going to be a big shortage of these blue collar workers, and we need blue collar workers.
Well, here's the thing. The market will open it up. I know a lot of guys that would rather just take up a job right now than go to college.
Yep.
I think that is true. That is true.
And half of the guys that work for me are college educated. The other half aren't. Actually, it's more like probably 20% are college educated, the guys that I pick up and work with. And they make between 30 and 120 an hour based on what they're doing. A lot of guys would rather do that sort of work.
Sure.
And without having to go to college, they just start saving and they start working immediately. It's not a problem as long as you just allow for those jobs to actually be able to exist.
Yeah, and like Nicki was talking about with the plumbing. Man, that's a heck of a paying job.
That's a really good
80
job.
to 150 an hour, depending upon where you are, what
Yeah.
you're doing.
AI has never taken that over.
No.
Electricians.
It's not going to take
Yeah.
anything over. It's going to shift and change. But yes.
Being a cement contractor, people that go out and lay cement, guys that go out that are bricklayers,
It's good work.
welders, fitters. Man, I'll tell you what.
If you're smart, you're making
welders make
$250.
Unreal money.
You're making between $150 and $250. If you're smart, you know how to market yourself, or you know the right people and the right job and niche, you're making good money.
And now you're making excellent money as a welder who just welds nothing but carbon. But if you can weld exotic metals,
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
man,
Yeah.
It's a big
your
deal.
money
Prime.
goes tremendously up.
All of that to say, I think that we can get a lot of manufacturing jobs back. It's going to be somewhat automated, and I think it is going to be definitely a higher tier job. It means it's going to be higher paying too. But it's not going to be fully, we're going to get all of the jobs back to America. That ship really has sailed. I'm sorry, and I don't think Trump believes otherwise. But it is going to improve. And so the Landry said, he brought up NAFTA in the chat on
the worst
PSP on
agreement.
DLive. So absolutely, that was a huge issue. Bill Clinton and George W. They both did a lot of damage with free trade, allowing things to go back and forth. The thing is that people really just haven't got yet. It seems like a lot of conservatives just haven't picked up on this. Trump is sticking the dagger right in China's heart with these tariffs. We've said it before in this program. Multi-hectare facilities, industrial parks built in Canada and in Mexico by China for Chinese material, which is refined just enough so that it can get a made in Mexico, made in Canada stamp on it, and then it's run through here. That's what Trump's about. That's why the penguins on that godforsaken island in the Arctic got a tariff, a 10% tariff slapped on them. So China can't build something there. That's what Trump is doing, and he's trying to get the rest of the world to actually align with him.
A lot of people don't want to talk about politics, and they don't want to do critical thinking. They don't want to dig to find out. They just want to throw stones at Trump, and they don't understand what he's really doing. And it's too bad because there are going to consequences. Trump is trying to save a lot of future consequences by making these changes, but people in the news, they're all about talking points. They're not about trying to educate the people on what's really happening. And
They're not
again,
interested in educating themselves.
Yes.
and again, let me bring up our young congresswoman who made a statement about, I don't need to talk about policy. I get more hits when I am sarcastic and edgy. She goes, Trump never talked about policy, which
That's
Trump.
not
That's
true.
wrong.
Everything Trump says is about policy.
It was about
everything.
policy. But
Yep.
look at her thinking. Her thinking is, I just need to be sarcastic and edgy. I don't need to talk about details. And as long as the population does not demand details, they're not going to give it to you.
Well, and that's where we come into the influencer politician
Yes, correct.
Yes.
sphere that has kind of been generated, and unfortunately, I think it's very much a negative thing. I wholeheartedly agree. Trump is unique because he is who he says he is. And for example, I love Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, for some reason, has never come off as relatable and as just authentic.
Can I tell you why?
And I like Ted Cruz. By the way, I've met Rafael Cruz many times at shows and events, and I love the guy.
He's lawyer-like.
He comes off as a lawyer, absolutely.
And Donald Trump comes off as a businessman.
As a businessman, almost he's not a roughneck, but he comes off as someone who is.
He comes across as a true New Yorker.
He cares and he's interested in
Yeah.
people's lives, and he's actually someone who talks to you.
Yes.
He'll actually stop and speak to people.
And that right there is what stirred up so many when it come to Bill Maher going and having dinner with him. And it's like,
Everyone's upset about that.
Give it a stinking rest. If there was anything that Bill Maher found out, it's that you can't just look at Trump and say, I hate you because you're Donald Trump.
Yep.
He found out the guy actually has a nice demeanor to him.
He does. He's actually a very pleasant person to work
Yep.
with. So, where are we on the tariff war? Well, in case you are under a rock, let's go ahead and play just one more clip of the news, how they're presenting it, because it's totally off the base.
Turn now to President Trump's trade war and confusion over whether the U.S. and China are actually in talks over the back and forth tariffs. ABC's Selena Wang is at the White House with the latest. Selena, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Whit. President Trump is claiming that he's made 200 trade deals, but there are fewer than 200 countries in the world, and the president isn't giving any details about those deals or what countries are involved. So the bottom line, guys, is that not a single trade deal has been announced. And as you mentioned, Whit, when it comes to the U.S.-China trade war, there's no clear end in sight, and it's not even clear if negotiations are even happening. So President Trump, for days now, he's been saying that there are these active talks between the U.S. and China on tariffs. But Beijing, they're flat out denying that, calling it fake news. China's foreign ministry says the countries have not consulted or negotiated on tariffs, adding that the United States should not confuse the public. The president also claims that he's spoken to Chinese leader Xi Jinping numerous times, but the president is not saying when. So when it comes to tariffs, still a lot of confusion out there for both businesses and consumers.
And Selena, as far as the impact here, some popular e-commerce sites are already starting to raise prices because of the tariffs.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the ultra-cheap clothes and goods that you can get from Shein and Temu, well, they're getting more expensive. Starting yesterday, the Chinese e-commerce retailers began hiking prices. It's unclear how much those prices are increasing by, but the companies say they have to do it because of changes to global trading rules and because of tariffs. Many goods from China are now taxed at a steep 145%, and President Trump is changing global trading rules. He is closing a trading loophole that allows goods valued under $800 to come into the U.S. for free. So both of those changes are major hits to the business models of both Shein and Temu. Guys?
Selena Wang,
Thank you. Mr. Producer.
This is all totally explainable.
Good.
Yes.
Good. And by the way, 200 countries were in talks, but no trade deals have been arrived at. Yeah, he said we're in talks. We're in the middle of working out a deal. And it's a complex situation. Like, look at what he's facing with China. We are looking, remember, we were told for decades, China's going to be the next hegemon. It's coming. You don't have any choice about it. We were told by the globalists, the neocons, the Clintons, the Bushes, China's coming. And you're going to have to learn to speak. I remember being told this as a first grader.
Speak that Mandarin.
Learn Mandarin. Did you hear that, Mr. Producer? I don't know if you ever did.
No.
So he's a Zoomer, but I heard you're going to have to learn how to speak Mandarin someday. And I said, really? Why? America is at the top of the world. Why do we have to give that over?
Yeah, I love the comment of, he said he's made 200 deals, but there's not even 200 countries. Well, see, that's surface information.
Well, they're being intentionally ignorant.
Well, yeah, but the deal is, you might have a tariff, like he was talking about the EU. They don't buy American vehicles. Okay, so is it a deal with every country, or is it a deal about a tariff on a certain item? Now, there's a different story.
So that's number one. Number two, if this truly is a quote unquote trade war, and I think everybody's kind of come to the understanding it's a trade war. Okay. Do you tell everybody what you're doing in your war?
No, Trump is too smart.
Trump did this to Canada. He made it clear what he was doing there. He made it clear what he was doing to Mexico. But the issue was, it wasn't because he was trying to lay out, here's what's coming. It was to force them to do something in response.
Correct.
He was playing a game of chess, and he was winning. And he's doing the same thing with China.
And it's all aimed at China. And so it is going to self-right.
It is.
I believe it's going to self-right. Let me rephrase that. If we can hold the line, I think it will self-right. Now, this is from Tim Mull. I took 2 years to own my own business. He says, I went to Job Corps and learned a trade at 18. Good on you. That is exactly the way to go. And I tell people, it says, look, if you want to go into a trade, you're going to have to work harder than a lot of college graduates will. But you'll make more money, and you'll be out the gate right now. Yeah. It took me, I worked in a couple of different professions in my 20s, and I've had to switch jobs more times than I like. But I now own my own business, and I'm bringing in enough money. I'm slowly able to hire people. That's happened in the last 2 years as well. It took years of learning, hard work. And the Landry says here, we need to make trade schools more affordable in America. I disagree. And let me specifically tell you why. We need to normalize apprenticeships again. We should normalize apprenticeships, because I have seen so many kids come into the different, Zoomers or millennials come in to places where I've worked or places where I've managed, and they have degrees or they have trade school. Don't care. They are dumb as a box of rocks. They have no idea what they're doing. I want references. That's why all these kids, they come out of college and they say, it takes me 2 years to get an entry-level job, and I have $160,000 of debt in my past.
Well, see, I think, college we need to do different. We need to get rid of the colleges as today as we know them. We don't need 4 years to get a degree, and we don't need to spend our time doing a lot of wasted classes, and we don't need the ideology that's being forced on our kids. 100%. I believe that college is becoming a moneymaker. It's not about educating kids anymore. It's about promoting ideology and making money. Yep. And we're hurting our own country, and I think it needs to be done differently. So
Tim just dropped this in the chat, and he says it really well. He said he worked for a contractor, and he was taught everything he needed to know on the job. One of my best friends, he and all of his brothers, they just went to work. They were 18. They found a family, a friend who did metal work. They're now union laborers on the East Coast. Shout out to the McDonald's. They're doing anywhere. Well, I should be careful about sharing salaries, but it's up there. It's up there. Like we're talking between 80 and 180 an hour is what they're making.
That in what you said earlier, and what the listener there that you just quoted, that's true apprenticeship. That's what it's all about. You're actually learning the skill. And so when somebody says, do you have experience? You can answer the question in a very affirmative way and say, yes, this is exactly what I learned. I learned how to run 14 gauge wire. I learned how to put in 2-inch pipe.
I can actually do
those things. That's right.
I can do a butt weld and it's not going to fall apart.
If you're an employer that thinks a degree is what your employee needs, and we know somebody right now that's got 20 years of oil and gas, and their employer has made it clear, you need a degree. Now, 20 years, we're talking about being 40 years old. You need a degree. We'll hire you, but with the promise that you'll get a degree. I have 20 years experience. That goes a lot farther than a 4-year degree. Something is wrong. If you're a person out there that thinks a degree is what makes you smart, something's wrong with you.
100%.
You're not a good businessman
Or woman.
or woman.
Well, you've never really worked with someone who came fresh green out of the gate with a degree and absolutely ruined your business. I've been there. I've seen it. I've been in middle management and seen people hire diversity hires who came in with $250,000 degree behind their back. They couldn't. One of them was a radio station. Gal could not. She was sweet. She took notes. She was very studious, but she could not ramp up, play bumper music, ramp up the volume slider, run down the master volume for the control booth, and then cut to a commercial and ramp that up. She could not manage that, and it destroyed that radio station. In 1 month, 2 months, it destroyed the relationship between management and ownership. And I told him, I was like, dude, you got to hire someone who's a broadcast professional. I know hungry guys that are, unfortunately, they're white. Well, anyway, maybe that was I don't know. But they would not hire at $10 an hour during mid-COVID. They would have been hired and they would have run it. But this gal had a degree. When you
Well, you think that
When you fall down at the worst, at the altar of the degree,
yeah.
it's bad.
it's
And
bad.
I will say that the people that I'm talking about are older. They're in their 70s and the ones that I'm referring to, thinking about at the time. And when they were young men, getting a degree meant something different back then than it does today. Today, I know that
It's a party.
Yeah, today people are graduating with the expectation, I have this degree now, so I'm worth this much, and this much.
I'm owed.
Yeah, they think they're owed, but they haven't done the work.
So it's what happens when you divorce yourself from reality. And unfortunately, our nation has done that. We've divorced ourselves from reality. And in the truest sense, I believe we've decoupled and divorced ourselves from God. Mm-hmm. And as the West, we've done that, which is a great segue into our next segment. When you decouple or divorce yourself from God, what happens to your society? Well, in Europe, we're getting a little bit of a preview. You know, the old adage has been Europe is 30 years or 40 years ahead of us. We're getting a little bit of a preview of what's happening in Europe with mass migration. Let's do a wellness check in on them and just see how that's going for them. This is in Germany. It's a Syrian immigrant hitting a German woman and her baby. This is just thank you, Mr. Producer. So if you go and look up the whole news story, link in the description on YouTube or Rumble or anywhere podcasts are found under @FurtherEveryday. Further Every Day. You can find our bibliography always there. We try to provide all of our sources. News story here. This Syrian woman, immigrant, walks up to a German woman who's just sitting in the park. Used to be able to have nice things. This is what happens when you have a homogenous culture. When I mean homogenous, I'm not just talking about race. I'm talking about a homogenous Western Christian culture, what was ultimately founded on Christianity. Atheism can ride its back and say, hey, look at us. We're so liberal. We're so open-minded. You could only live in a free, clean society if it weren't for a religion like Christianity. I'm sorry, at least one that's not totalitarian. You look at over at the East, they have clean societies, but it's under the rod of iron. Now you're inviting in people. You've completely detached yourself from reality. You're multicultural. We can allow people in here without borders, without any discrimination, which is a good thing, by the way. Discrimination, we all discriminate. If you decide to eat steak or pudding, you have made a discrimination. If you decide to hire a babysitter for your children who has credentials versus the hobo on the street, you have discriminated. One of them, you're not saying the hobo's of less value, but you're saying, I know this person. They come with recommendations. I can trust this person. Bringing in someone who's a Sharia supremacist who hates you because of the color of your skin or because of your religion or your lack thereof, and then expecting everything to go peacefully in your nation, that is a bad idea. And by the way, to make this story worse, The woman and her husband who posted this video in Germany are now under prosecution and investigation by the German authorities. No looking to the Syrian woman who did the assault.
How did I know that?
For a hate crime.
Yep.
Because the family who was assaulted posted this on social media, they are now being potentially prosecuted by German authorities.
For a hate crime.
For a hate crime. Because they posted a factual video.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you divorce yourself from God?
Somebody's got to play God.
And man does a bad job.
I was watching that, and I'm sitting here, and this lady is attacking this woman with a baby, and everybody's just walking by like it's no big deal.
Yeah,
and
but
I'm going,
yeah.
what in the world are these people morons?
Well, the thing is, they have so bought into the cult-like lie, and we're going to look at what they do in Britain in just a moment. But they've bought in so far into the lie that multiculturalism has to be protected. It is to the detriment of Christians or white people, depending upon it, because they're seen as the same. And maybe they shouldn't be seen as the same. But you look at the society that was built around the Christian world, which is predominantly white. It's not completely white. You look at all the colonial territories that actually took and ceded, and those are deeply Christian territories. They are still prosperous and peaceful. I'll say not all Catholic. I love my Catholic brothers and sisters, but all of the places where Protestantism firmly took in, very, very clean and clear that it is a thriving society. Catholicism, I want to be careful because there's always like that mix in South America and Central America of paganism and Catholicism, and I don't want to make a straw man there. As a Protestant, I'm not coming after the Catholics. I'm just saying in that one case you can make an argument. But where Catholicism also is still standing strong, I think you do still have a very good society, a useful society. Where Christianity is, you have that. Someone asked in the comments, they were just missing it. Just so that I reiterate, this mom and her child, the mom who's filming, are attacked out of the blue. So just to sum up that story one more time, in case we didn't get it, this mom and her kid are at the park. She's filming her kid. The Syrian refugee comes up and starts to hit this woman's child.
I think she was hitting her with a child.
Well, so she's hitting the woman and the child. And the woman starts to intervene. And then it devolves into a fisticuffs match. Mm-hmm. And then the German authorities, because there's nothing done, and this family posts this video on social media, they don't go after the Syrian refugee, the instigator, because she's a Muslim. And again, I have nothing against Muslims. I have a lot against Sharia supremacism. Really, I do. But I have nothing against my family members, my friends who are Muslim, don't have anything against you. But Sharia supremacists, like the Syrian woman, are a terror to society by definition. But instead of going after the terrorist, literal terrorist, invoking terror for jihad, for a good, for an outcome, literal terrorist, they go after the German citizen. What do we see in Great Britain? Well, we see a number of things. And again, the Christian persecution specifically is becoming more common in Great Britain. I want to pull up this one clip, and I'll set it up real quick, Mr. Producer, before we put it up. You have a man here, and just set up who's talking. This is a preacher who is sharing the gospel, I believe, with tracts and just conversations in public in the UK. And this is how he's treated by local authorities.
If you preach in here, it also depends on what you say, because you might be committing criminal offences as well.
For example, give us an example.
Any homophobic comments?
Yeah. If you make a members of the public harassment, alarm, distress.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
It's a criminal offence.
I'm aware of that. Yeah. So that's what we're not really doing that. What we're doing is about preaching our religion.
You're going to provide me with the details, yes or no?
What details are you requesting?
I need your name and your address.
Okay, so can you explain to me why do you need these details?
Pardon?
Can you explain to me? Because I don't understand why.
Okay, currently there's allegation.
Okay.
It's an offence.
So what allegation was it, sir?
Hate crime.
Hate crime.
Section 4, public order offence.
So what was said to cause the hate crime, sir?
Homophobic behaviour.
Give me an example, sir. Give me an example.
I've not heard anything. I'm not saying I've heard anything. Someone's called us, okay? It might be completely untrue. It might be true. I do not know. If you don't give me your name and address, I have grounds to arrest you. Google it. It's code of practice, okay?
I'm aware
I can arrest you.
I know.
Okay?
That's fine. I appreciate that.
Can I confirm you're aware of the allegation now that's been made?
Now, I'm still not aware. That's why I want to ask you some questions, yeah?
So, what aren't you sure of? I can see you smiling, so I think you're finding this a
I'm
bit
smiling
of a joke.
because I'm a friendly person.
I'm going to ask you one last time, otherwise you're going to be placed under arrest.
Excuse me.
I'm going to ask you for the final time, sir. I'm not asking anymore.
Excuse me.
You've been asked.
If you preach in here,
Pause
it
it,
also
Mr. Producer.
depends.
Thank you. Go ahead and pull that clip down. That's what you're seeing in the UK right now for street preachers. Now, I want to take it another level, just to go to Germany, and then I want to open this up, and I've got one more if you think it. So we're going to go 3 levels. If you're speaking about Christ, you will be ticketed. You will potentially be arrested. If you put on social media anything about Christ, this happens. When you're ready, Mr. Producer.
And we do have dedicated police officers who are scouring social media. Their job is to look for this material and then follow up with identification arrests and so forth.
This is in relation to some comments that you made on a Facebook page.
You were witnesses saying, obviously, people, why are they over here, etc., we let them into our country, etc.
A woman has been arrested by Cheshire Police in relation to inaccurate information on social media.
Someone has been caused, obviously, anxiety based
What are you
on
causing?
your social media page. That's the reason why you've been arrested.
In Russia last year, 400 people were arrested for things that they said on social media. How many people do you think were arrested in Britain for things they said on social media last year? Take a guess.
I have no idea.
3,300.
Really? Arrested for what they'd said on social media? Yeah. My goodness.
In Britain.
So thank you, Mr. Producer. So that's from John Anderson's YouTube channel. Go check him out. Link in the description in Further Every Day at Rumble, YouTube, or anywhere podcasts are found. If you are posting stuff in social media, and by the way, we had this in the last administration. It was called the Ministry of Truth. I mean, oops. We had this.
You know, that woman, that woman did go, what country was it? Was it Britain that she went to? I can't remember, but she did go to a foreign country and told that country they needed to stand up to America. She was an American and went to a foreign country to...
Yes, she just did that this last month. Yeah. I mean, when does that not become treason? But
I know.
But so if you speak about Jesus in public, if you post about him in public, what happens if you just think about Jesus in public? What happens if you're in public, or if you're anywhere near the heart of the leftist cult, say like an abortion clinic? What happens, Mr. Producer?
Are you protesting?
No.
Are you here to pray for the lives of unborn children?
As I've mentioned to one of your colleagues before, I think that's a little bit of a leading question. No, I'm not, actually, today.
Can your actions be carried out elsewhere?
I'm not doing any actions. I'm just simply thinking silently in my head.
Okay, and why have you chosen this location to stand?
This is an abortion centre. I'm praying for those who've been hurt by abortion.
So, when I said before, are you here to pray for the lives of unborn children?
Yes.
So, yeah.
I said no.
Said no.
I'm praying for those who've been hurt by abortion.
Hurt by abortion?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So
Crafty.
There's a public space protection order in place here.
Yes, I don't know if you know, but I have actually been arrested twice. I've gone to court and been acquitted for allegedly my silent prayers. I've actually received an email from the police telling me I'm allowed to be in this area. I don't know if you're familiar with that situation at all.
This is exclusion area?
Yes, that's right. That's why I was arrested previously. So yes, I'm very much aware there's a PSPO in place.
Okay. And are you aware that you are breaching the public order protection order in place?
I'm not breaching it, no.
Good.
Will you move from here to outside of the
Stand up.
zone?
I don't see any reason why I would need to do that for the reasons I've just explained to you.
Okay. So if not, why are you not willing to move outside of the exclusion zone?
Because of what I've just said, because I don't think I need to move outside the
He's reading
exclusion zone. I've been
list.
to court over this.
It's a script, effectively.
Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to issue a fixed penalty notice now.
So what am I being issued a fixed penalty notice for?
Because I believe, and my colleague believes, that you're here to protest.
I just told you I'm not protesting. I'm simply silently praying.
Thank you, Mr. Producer. So she's just simply silently praying, and I think that you deserve a ticket, a fine, a fixed penalty. It's a ticket. It's a fine. So let's go one step further. We talked about Germany. We've talked about Britain. Is it possible this will happen in America? Mr. Producer, go ahead.
I'm Sergeant Liz Lenzen, Tempe PD.
Hello.
Hey, who's been using the megaphone?
I have.
Yeah, and what's your name?
Jeff.
Yes, this is in America.
Jeff, it's Pastor Jeff.
Pastor Jeff.
Yes.
I'm so supposed to know, where are you pastor at?
Apologia Church in Tempe.
Okay, and what's your last name, Jeff?
Do you need that for anything?
Yes, we do, because we have a complaint that we're working. That's why we're here.
Okay. Well,
otherwise, we would not be here.
No, I respect your position. I was just telling this officer over here, in order for me to identify myself, I have to be cited with a crime according to Arizona state law.
Correct. Well, we're going to give you a warning right now, so we're going to need that for our street check. So what's your last name?
Okay, so the warning is a violation of the law?
Well, because of the amplified sound device.
Well, what I was saying to the officer
Where's
was...
Zach?
He's right over here.
Zach. Where's the other Zach? Zach number
Morgan,
one.
he's out of state right now.
Okay, I'm used to, they know me. And Steven knows me. So you're going to be given a warning. You cannot use. And
well, officer, you can't do that. Officer, you can't do that unless you have a calibrated meter according to city code.
Oh, we can.
And you test it.
Good for you, bud.
And so
you can violate this law.
We have a complaint that's a citizen.
A complaint of illegal activity.
We have complaint
of illegal activity.
Disorderly conduct.
Ma'am, if you read the city code, you'll see you can't.
We're not arguing. You've been given a warning. You can't use your amplified sound device. If you will, you go to jail. You've already been given that warning.
Ma'am, you're not even looking at you're a supervisor. You won't look at the law?
No, I know the law.
We'll file a suit against you.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Lenzen.
Gotcha. Okay, let's get that on the camera. Officer Lenzen.
We got our cams going.
Officer Lenzen, would you like it to look at the law?
We'll do this. Lenzen.
Is this professional activity on your part to behave in this manner?
You've got a warning, so please don't do it. We don't
What's the warning for?
You.
This is my question. What's the warning for?
Warned already. Okay.
Officer, what's the warning for?
Amplified sound device.
That's legal activity.
You can't use it.
You won't look at this?
Don't use it.
It's a legal activity.
We have a complaint.
Ma'am, we'll sue you for violating our constitutional rights.
Good. You can. It's your right.
It is my right, and I want to do this for the record of the court. She will not look at the city code.
Warning. Thank you.
You won't look at the city code?
No, I already know it.
Yeah, ma'am, I reject your warning.
Okay.
I reject it.
We're going to document.
And we're going to continue to use sound amplification because it's our constitutional right. And if you try to violate our constitutional rights, we will sue you and the city of Tempe.
Okay.
Okay? All right. And just know it's on record. You refuse to see the city code.
I don't care.
You refuse to look at it. You don't have it, man. You don't even know what it is.
I don't lose any money.
Yep.
Do you know what happened?
So, just follow for just a second. Some of you don't like his response. He explains himself very well.
You need to repent of your lawless conduct. This is lawless. You are not engaging in activity as law enforcement right now. You are engaging in thuggish,
correct,
oppressive, unconstitutional behavior.
Correct.
You don't know the law, and yet you pretend to represent it. Correct. The law states I have freedom of speech. The law states you have to have a calibrated meter in order to cite me for anything. You didn't even know you're not allowed to ask for my ID without citing for a crime.
Correct.
Officer, you didn't know the law, and she didn't know the law.
They don't care.
Right.
No, they don't.
Right. I appreciate that. But how come you guys didn't know you have to have a calibrated meter? You're citing people for disorderly conduct and no amplification, and you didn't even know the law. That's not law enforcement, sir.
Apologia Studios, for those of you asking who this guy is. He's a pastor in Arizona, in Tempe, Arizona.
You will be sued, sir. You're on record.
He's outside an abortion
clinic. This entire
clinic.
activity has been documented on video. You guys criminally cited somebody last week.
This is the rub.
You stole their property. You're engaged in lawless behavior, sir.
For those of you thinking he's too mean as a Christian, listen. This is where it goes if you don't stand up.
So, obviously, we're being a little more firm with the police today.
Good.
The police recently have been harassing us and trying to stop us from doing this work. The police recently cited our friend Stephen, who's been out here for years saving lives. He has a court case this month for this very issue.
Which should not be.
Also, they stole his property, which is valued at over $300, which I think is a felony if a private citizen was to do that. So the police showed up just now, had no idea of what the law was. That was a supervisor. She didn't realize that you cannot criminally cite somebody for constitutionally protected activity. They didn't know that you had to have a calibrated meter to actually test the level of sound. And you just noticed that she wouldn't even look at the city code. She wouldn't even look at it because they're not concerned with it. It's apparent that the city of Tempe, 2 different departments, including the police department, are colluding with the business owners here and with Planned Parenthood to stop our constitutionally protected activity.
Correct.
So you'll notice I was a little more firm with the police department there and calling them out on their lawless activity. Because if Christians don't actually...
So if they don't stand up for themselves, no one else will. By the way, Apologia Studios on YouTube, link in the description of this video on Further Every Day or YouTube when it gets posted this week. Guys, so just I'm getting some good examples in the comments of folks who agree with us, but someone said, who thinks he's not being Christian enough? Someone else said, being nice is not Christian. That's the crux of it. American Christianity has been, forgive me, bastardized.
Yes.
We do not know who Christ is. Christ is kind. He's not nice. Christ is kind. It is not kind to allow the murder of the unborn to go on for decades. It is not kind to allow young women to be lied to be basically, forgive me, it's as bad as rape. Okay? It is as bad as that when they do not know what is happening. It is as bad, and then there's also the child. It is not kind to sit silently.
It should be. I'm sorry. It should be remembered what Jesus said. He came bearing a sword.
Yes.
The cross is offensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's offensive because you're on the wrong side of it.
Correct.
So when we are looking at situations like this, well, they're not being Christian, and they're not doing this, and they're not doing... Hush. You don't understand Christianity, and you should stop speaking. You march Jesus into a middle of a room that is packed with people. I promise you, he will split that room wide open.
You ain't kidding.
Because you are going to choose one side or the other. It will be natural. When we all stand before Jesus, we will bow. It will not be something that you will be able to fight. You'll just do it because it's going to become natural.
It's going to happen
it's
by
the
nature.
Power of Christ.
It's what God is. You will bow. You will submit before God.
That pastor, that is a perfect illustration of how to handle a very difficult situation like that. And let me also say this. I'll guarantee you that pastor is okay with supporting police doing their job.
Yes, he is.
Oh, yeah.
He's not anti-police.
No, he's not, Charlie.
He is somebody that will stand with them, but he's not going to allow the rights under the law to be violated on a very important issue like this.
What did Paul do? What did Paul do? Hey, is it lawful that you haven't even given me my right as a Roman citizen?
Boy, and
it's biblical.
It is.
Hey, it's biblical. That is how we are supposed to act. We are supposed to be wise as serpents.
And what did he get? He got his chance.
He got his chance to share the gospel because of that.
You bet he did.
And so, absolutely, this is where we need to remember this is not our home. And this is not our world. And we really need to stop being nice. We need to be kind. I'm not advocating violence.
Amen.
Amen. Look at how he handled himself. He was respectful. He de-escalated. He was firm, though. He was firm. You can be all of these things. Meekness. What is meekness? Is meekness weakness?
No.
Not at all.
No. Meekness is
meekness?
power under control.
So just define that, because that pastor, I think,
that was meekness.
Very eloquently,
Yes.
meekly presented himself.
I would agree. He was not calling her names. He was referring to, I know what the law is. And now he was strong.
He
but
described
wasn't
the
ugly.
actions
He
as
wasn't,
thuggish.
Yeah, he wasn't. Yes. He was strong in standing on the law, that he knew that he was within its rights, and everybody should be able to do that.
Well, she didn't care about what the law was.
I am
she,
the law.
Exactly.
Very, very Sylvester Stallone, Judge
exactly.
Dredd here.
And what I got from that was, and from a lot of these actually that I watched, it was more like seeing a clip from Judge Dredd.
It's crazy.
You know what I mean?
They think.
I mean, it's
they
like
think they're above.
Sure.
All of the and so
judge,
that's what I'm
jury,
saying.
executioner, man.
Before BLM, I always said I have a problem with our police, with the over-militarization of them, with the mentality. A lot of people come back from Afghanistan or Iraq or Kuwait, and they have this war on crime mentality, where it's not that they're here to serve and protect and to be a someone who holds the line against evil. They're here to go to war. And those are two different things. The outcome hopefully is the same, but sometimes it's not. You have this idea of, I'm here to exert and dominate, as opposed to, I'm here to hold the line and be the breach, stand in the breach of society between good and evil, versus I'm here to go to war. And
I
there's
think,
some people
though,
who come.
I'm a very strong supporter of our police department.
I am too.
And you're always going to have a bad apple in every one.
But it comes down to philosophy.
Yeah.
What do they really believe?
Where does it emanate from?
And we have to look at where
it emanates from the top.
Yeah, and one of the things, like, it really depends on where you're at. If you're in a blue city or a red city,
100%.
And some people think, okay, if they're protesting outside of an abortion clinic, which is their right to protest.
Yep, sure.
Within the law,
which they
within the law, it's your right to protest. But some blue cities are going to think, well, yeah, it might be the law, but we don't like that law, so we're going to harass in a sense.
It all comes down to philosophy and belief.
Yes. Whereas in the county we live in, if there was an abortion clinic, it would probably be handled much differently.
Well, yeah. Y'all are fortunate to live in Montgomery.
Well, somebody there pays money from an abortion clinic into probably somebody's re-election campaign, because it's got to be a money thing with that sort of thing happening, because she didn't care.
Sometimes.
And she wasn't worried.
But she was probably
got
told.
sued because
she was probably told by her. She was probably told to go to clean it up.
Sure.
She probably was.
Because she didn't care.
Yeah, and she has no regard for the actual constitutional rights of the individuals involved.
Didn't care. Exactly.
So speaking of not caring for the constitutional rights of those involved, what happens when you decouple God, or you divorce God from your community, and you instead give the responsibility of the community to the government? This is Charlie's story. And Mr. Producer, if you can throw this one up. This is an opinion piece that came out recently. This is cut 12. If you can go ahead and read the excerpt out of here, Charlie, I'll start.
Give me just a second.
Amish easily do what federal government wouldn't do for months.
Can you believe that?
And
I got hung up on my thing.
This is an article from this last week.
And
Charlie.
just to give a little piece to this, we're talking about all the different disasters that have happened within the U.S. in the last year, and there's no way that you can forget about what happened in western North Carolina and that area, parts of Tennessee, a little bit of South Carolina, Georgia. Had a hurricane come up there, dumped a lot of water, tremendous flooding in the mountains, wiped out communities. And what was the big beef with Biden and the appropriate group that was supposed to respond? That would have been FEMA. And that was, we're not getting any help. fast forward to the fires in LA. And we're dealing with another one of our wonderful agencies, same agency. And how are they doing? Well, they're quote unquote helping a little bit in LA. So here's the context of this story. This group, the Amish, are doing what FEMA should have been helping with. Now, I'm going to advocate right here, right now, before we get into this. I don't need FEMA. I don't want FEMA.
FEMA blocks people from being able to get into ingress roads.
That's the dangers of relying on government.
They're preventing you from being able to do your civic duty that's ultimately ordained by God. Ultimately, your duty to your neighbor, your Good Samaritan duty, is ordained by God. Go ahead.
So, Amish volunteers have reportedly stepped in to rebuild the town of Chimney Rock, North Carolina. This is one of the hardest hit areas, following devastation by Hurricane Helene. The hurricane hit the southeastern U.S. in late September 2024, wreaking destruction from Florida to Ohio. The death toll numbered over 230 people, according to reports. A video shared on X identifies the volunteers reconstructing Chimney Rock's infrastructure as Amish members of the Great Needs Trust. Now, here's the thing, and I read another article, it was not related to that, about a sawmill. It was an Amish sawmill that was destroyed by fire, and I believe it was in the summer. From the date that the fire was put out to the date that they actually rebuilt the sawmill and it was functioning, and this was a large sawmill.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody want to guess?
14 days.
10.
Close.
10 days.
Close enough.
Guys, when I remember Trump distinctly saying to Karen Bass in L.A., these people are going to be allowed to rebuild, right?
They better be.
They better be, right? And we're going to remove the permit process. We're going to really speed this up. And she was hedging and all of that. Look, guys, you don't need to do a lot of studying. I've watched this. I have actually watched this. And the one that really caught my eye was the fires in Lahaina, in Hawaii. And you want to know what, guys? They went 1 year plus before anybody could get back onto their property and even think about rebuilding.
Yeah,
and even now, that's right.
Something was up with that.
And even now, they are still way behind. What's going on?
Well, it's great for all of the developers and all the buddies who are wanting to buy a property from people who cannot afford to hold property and not have a place to live.
Lake Charles has suffered from this. Well, how did that happen? Well, 2 hurricanes in a row in 1 year, and lo and behold, what have you got?
Hold up.
Okay. So in Tennessee, there was a fire at one of the Amish sawmills, and they put this back together in 10 days. And the whole point of this is that when you have major disasters that happen, you don't want to be relying on government. You want to be relying on the local church. You want to be relying on the people in the surrounding area. I remember when Hurricane Harvey came through, more than 85% of the Metro Houston area was underwater. 85%. I remember one of the themes that was happening. There was so many people helping other people during that time, and they made it clear, we don't need FEMA. And FEMA did come eventually, but the whole thing is that we can do it if we're just willing to help each other. And that really is that's the crux of really what we should be looking to do when we get into
I love the story about the Amish. I guess my questions would be, because Amish, they don't use modern electricity and things of that nature. So, we have to wait on permits and codes and inspections and things like that. So 10 days for that story, that's amazing. But is it realistic if you are going to do a modern house with electricity that has to receive permits and inspections.
That's
and
a great question. When you look at the Amish, and I don't know where exactly that was, my gut tells me that was a very rural area. But when you're talking about something like Lahaina, when you're talking about something like L.A., where the fires happen, the issue of permits is not going to go away. The only way that you're going to be able to do things like that quickly is if you actually rescind or suspend the requirements for those. I'm not saying suspend for inspections and things like that. I'm just saying suspend for the permit itself, because it's just it can be a time-consuming process. You've only got so many people that can process a permit.
And I'm afraid that what happened in Hawaii and what happened in LA is going to become a common story, because how many people lost their homeowners insurance because the insurance, we know major insurance companies that are pulling out of California because the cost to rebuild a house in California is outrageous.
And that was going right to the heart of what I was talking about with regards to Lake Charles, Louisiana. What happened there? You had 2 hurricanes that hit in the same year. I want you to think about something, and this is becoming even more commonplace all around the country today. You have deductibles, very high deductibles, that have to be paid for in order to complete work.
Yeah.
If you don't have the money for a deductible to repair a property, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. You're going to take the insurance money and you're going to run.
Yeah.
And you can drive around Lake Charles today. No joke, folks. You can do this, I assure you, because I've done it recently. You can run over to Lake Charles and you will see the remnants of tarps on different roofs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's from years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Those aren't recent. What happened? The tarps were put up. The people got their claim checks. They took them, cashed them, and left because they couldn't afford to fix their property.
Yeah.
So real quick, just a quick check-in with the chat. If you are on the live, can you just go ahead and let us know on DLive or Vaughn.live if you guys are still hearing us well. I just checked in outside of the studio. It sounds like we're coming through again just fine, but please let us know.
Really appreciate you guys holding tight on that.
Patience.
We just cut out again.
We just cut out again? Oh my gosh. Okay.
John Arthur, it might be something weather-wise.
All right, guys. Sorry about that. Let us know in the chat if you can hear us again. I think we just had a power surge. So my sincerest apologies. Now, let us know if we still are sounding okay. So our apologies there. With that said, let's go ahead and kind of move in to the next segment here. Again, my apologies, guys. We had a power surge. Going to go ahead and get that looked at. Hopefully, things go a little bit smoother in the future. So, anyway, let's move on to what happens when you decouple God from your sexuality. Well, we actually saw this, fully on display recently. That there was a piece of news that was running the rounds, and I think it's an interesting social media short of a town hall at a public school.
Oh, dear.
And let's just see what happens to your culture when you remove God from your sexuality. Go ahead, Mr. Producer.
You're afraid of... Y'all are the transphobic pieces of shit. I hope y'all all burn in hell. Hell, Satan!
We won't be burning in hell, ma'am.
Y'all are really afraid of authenticity and people being their own true selves. You're afraid of love. You're afraid of solidarity.
Not afraid of solidarity.
Crazy for that. Absolutely crazy. I'm on my way. It's over. Just wait. And all of you came here just to kiss Sonia's.
What's your police officer?
Pathetic.
So, thank you, Mr. Producer. We're not afraid of solidarity. We're refusing to hold solidarity with evil.
Mm-hmm.
Solidarity is not a good thing. It is a neutral thing. You will either have solidarity with God or you will not. And by the way, you notice how there's a lack there. There's a good and there's an evil. There is no such thing as evil. There's only good. Evil is a lack of good. You can't find a lump of evil, as an apologist we know locally here in Houston one time said. He says you can't find a lump of evil. It's not a thing. If you have a sweater, he uses this analogy, and I've used it many times. I think it's a very good analogy. If you have a sweater and you have a moth-eaten hole on it, there's been an evil, a privation put upon that sweater. The hole does not exist without the sweater, but the sweater can certainly exist without the hole. Mm-hmm. Good can exist without evil. Evil cannot exist without the determination and definition of what good is. And that's where you come down to, we had someone, I had a question come in. And by the way, send your theological questions in. Middle of this month, we're going to do a theological question episode where we're going to be talking about your questions on theology. We had someone come in and say, hey, I have an LGBT coworker, and how would you defend the faith? Well, it really came down to this. What is marriage? Is marriage at its heart, does it have a purpose? And once you divorce yourself from that purpose, the image of Christ knocking on the door, pursuing and wooing the church, the woman, the man comes, pursues the woman. Without the man and the consent of the woman, no new life can be created. But when those two come together, a new life is formed. And there's something beautiful. That's the crux of the gospel, buried at the heart of marriage. When you do something outside of that, even if it's a man who takes what he wants in a marriage without fully wooing the woman into that, that's damage to that institution. As we as Christians say that that's an evil thing, let alone when it's a man and a man. Christ does not pleasure himself with another Christ. He comes to the church. Mm-hmm. Women, or the church, does not find another church to pleasure itself to. You guys understand what we're saying? Mm-hmm. This is the difference between one man, one woman versus any of the deviations. You have 1,000 deviations. You only have one way to do it right. And once you divorce yourself from that, you are lost, and you're focused on solidarity for solidarity's sake.
And let's keep in mind that we're not just talking. We're talking about people committing fornication and adultery. They may be attracted to the opposite sex, but they're not doing it within the plan that God created. And Correct. It's really more of a spiritual thing. I love the picture. Remember what Christ said, or what God said, go forth and multiply. When you multiply, you create more of images of God. That's what creation is. This is a very strong spiritual matter, and that's why I think the consequences are so important and so devastating when it's not done within the picture. And by the way, you can be married and you can treat each other incorrectly according to the God-given plan, 100%. And there are consequences for that.
100%. So, and again, it comes down to a matter of telos, or purpose. And that's what we were trying to lay out for that one listener and, good friend of the show. If you do not understand the purpose, you will miss the beauty.
Yes.
If you do not understand the purpose, you will miss the beauty. And the beauty, and again, I don't want to sound too universalist, too unitarian, or even that God's holiness doesn't matter, because his holiness does matter. It is critical. I don't want to be utilitarian to the detriment of acknowledging God's holiness, but he built the universe a certain way. And there is a certain way where all of this makes sense. And without him, it falls apart. That is what you see in our culture. That's what you see in our sexuality. That's what you see in our government, in our communities. It's also what you see in the interpersonal relationship between man and woman. And I believe this is a great segue into our next bit. What happens when you divorce God from marriage? What happens when you take the purpose for, and just the marital act is how I'll say it here. The marital act, when you remove God from it and you remove the image of Christ coming, laying down his life for the church, and the church receiving and submitting to that, and then new life forming. What happens when you remove that? What does that look like? Well, we saw that this week in the culture. And you see that, you have to look no further than this story. Mr. Producer, it's cut 14, please.
Welcome back. And tonight, the legal troubles for NFL Hall of Famer Shannon Sharpe, they are growing as his legal team pushes back against new and resurfaced allegations. Sharpe is facing a new civil lawsuit filed last week, but it's also drawing attention to a separate defamation lawsuit filed against him in 2023 by Michelle Bundy Evans. Evans previously accused Sharpe of sexual assault dating back to 2010. Allegations his attorney calls fanciful exaggerations and blatant misrepresentations. Sharpe's legal team says both claims are part of a coordinated effort to exploit his fame, and they plan to fight back with evidence in court. Well, on Thursday, the retired NFL star announced he's temporarily stepping away from his role at ESPN. Welcome back.
And the culture at ESPN is not
a good one.
Not a good one. You know, I'm not going to go any further with that. Shannon Sharpe is probably not your poster choir boy, but I'm not going to say that he's guilty either.
But well, let's go one step further. Let's listen to the audio from him and this woman. Go ahead and cut it.
Anything I say, you're just gonna like get mad at, and you're just gonna hang up on me. So I feel like
I'm not gonna hang up on you. Here's what it is.
What does that even mean?
Nothing, Gabby. You want to be a dick to me now, so.
I don't want to be. Don't manipulate me.
Oh, no, have mercy. If you say that one more time, I'm going to choke the out of you when I see you.
Uh-oh.
Wait.
Thank you.
Well, I don't want to be choked.
Yes, you do.
Wait. There's context to this.
I don't think you have a choice in the matter.
Anything I say, you're just gonna like get.
Nope.
No,
okay. Well, that's okay. So it goes on further, but the thing is that conversation on its own sounds really, really suggestive and concerning, but not until you go and you actually read some of the text messages that Shannon Sharpe delivered. Go ahead and put that out, Mr. Producer. This next cut. Mm-hmm. Shannon Sharpe's lawyers release X-rated texts, name accuser in a $50 million civil, lawsuit. She additionally wrote, "I want to be abused, Daddy." And she did that on March 14th. "I want to put a dog collar. Want you to put a dog collar on my neck and choke me with it while you're doing something to me," according to the alleged messages. The two talked about having a baby. She says she wants a black baby inside her. That's all I want to read. Thank you, Mr. Producer. Link in the description below. You can Google it. It's sickening stuff. So what you've done is you have a BDSM thing going on here, okay? And you have a man out of wedlock doing these acts consensually. But here's my question. Should it matter if it's consensual or not? Yes, it kind of should in the case of the law, but in God's eyes, does it matter?
That's right. Yeah.
That's my issue with it, is that you have a man and a woman acting in this disordered way. And look, if this is what you do at home, but think about the violence you're doing to the state of marriage. If you are whipping someone, if you're humiliating someone, I'm not coming after you, but I am saying, get married. What you do in the bedroom is your own business.
Isn't he married?
I don't know. Is he? I really don't care. I don't know who Shannon Sharpe is, other than he's on ESPN and he's doing this depraved, disordered garbage with a younger woman, and he's paying her exorbitant amounts of money. He's her sugar daddy, and they're doing this incredibly disordered garbage. Okay.
But this is where it ends up without God.
Yeah, and I like the word that you said, disorder, because disorder causes chaos, confusion, and just out.
It's violence to the whole institution.
It really is. And so you got to, if you want other people to respect you, you got to respect yourself first. You really do.
Yeah, and then he's claiming that her and her lawyer or she does wants like some exorbitant amount of money.
Correct.
I mean, it's like, sounds like she's trying to blackmail him.
It does. There's money involved and she's been getting lots of money. I'm not saying that maybe she wasn't a willing partner at the time that this thing happens, but you have a history that sounds like you were very complacent in the activity that was going on and that you were being paid very handsomely by this person. And so what now it does, it raises doubt in your accusation because of your history.
Right.
And it all of this to say, it utterly undermines the purpose of marriage. That you have a man and a woman outside of wedlock committing acts that really, and so here's my problem. Most of these scenarios, when you have that, to use the word kink, statistically, you've been abused and you are reliving out trauma. Instead of healing it, you are reliving that out.
You turn it back open.
So I don't want to make that the issue here so much as acting out of wedlock is the issue. But I will say there is a disorder there. When you're committing pain and violence to someone else, and then you think that way. Somebody says, "Yeah, actually, you do." I have no respect for him for saying it that way. I have no respect for him thinking that way. But you know what? It's hard to say. It's a huge soupy mess, and because we've divorced ourselves from God, that is sort of the natural course of things.
I'm not sure that he ends up back on ESPN because this is going to get dragged through the mud.
It's bad.
And he'll be a liability to them.
Yeah. And so his reputation's destroyed. If he had just married one woman, stayed with one woman.
Everything has consequences. And this was unseen consequences, even though he felt I'm in a consensual type of relationship. There was still a lot of disorder to it. And now there's consequences for it.
Correct. So it's a sad and ugly thing. So that's what damage and violence to the institution of marriage ultimately does to the culture. Last thought, Steve, and then we got to get to the war the birds won.
Oh, last thoughts?
No.
Oh.
No, not last thoughts, unless you had something you wanted to say. Otherwise, we're getting to the war the birds won because we got to go.
Go ahead.
Miss Nicki.
Go ahead.
This is a segment now for Nicki Knows.
Well, this is fun. We're going to go to something a little lighthearted here.
We're going to clear up a little bit, clear the air from BDSM to
So back in the early 1900s, there was something called the Great Emu War. My husband's going to have to help me because I'm always saying emu, and it's an emu, so you understand the difference. But anyway, this article that I read was written by Rebecca Mikulik, and it was fact-checked by the Encyclopedia Britannica. But it's a really fun story. An emu has been a common a large flightless bird. It's been in Australia for thousands of years. There's actually 3 subspecies that are recognized in Australia. There is a species in the northern part, the southeastern part, and the southwestern part.
Which one is it that sells the insurance?
That's emu.
Oh,
that's an emu. Yes.
Right, but
yes.
which species is it?
I don't know because there was actually a 4th species that is now. There was a 4th one that is now extinct, but that was on in Tasmania. It could be the
one that could be extinct.
But Tasmania, So anyway, an emu, who is a bird that over a course of a year they will migrate for hundreds of kilometers in looking for food and water in Australia. Well, in 1922, the government changed the status of the emu from a protected species to a vermin because they were destroying crops. Mainly
I can believe that.
You and I know what we do with vermins.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So they would often break through a farmer's fence and get in there, and they would destroy large amounts of crops. And back in the early 1900s, that was devastating. So in 1932, there was a drought, and this unusually large amount of emus migrated to the Western Australia, and they destroyed a massive amount of crops, mainly wheat. Now, at this time, there was a worldwide depression. So there was a great deal of fear that this was going to hurt the country economically because of what these birds were doing. Now, most of the damage happened in a district called Campion District, and this was dominated. The farmers in this area, a lot of them were World War I veterans that were given these parcels of land to go and farm. Now, by 1932, 1/4 of these inexperienced farmers had just abandoned the land and left. But the other ones that were there, they had permission to shoot the emus, but they didn't have the resources. So they complained to the government, and the government did take them seriously, and they got 3 men from the Royal Australian Artillery, and I am not going to say all their names, but we have a Major Meredith, a Sergeant McCurry, a Gunner O'Halloran, and they also took with them a cinematographer.
Cinematographer.
There you go. Thank you very much. So they were given 2 machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition, and their goal was to go and kill off these emus. Okay,
which is just wild.
So you're thinking,
Sounds
okay,
like fun.
You know, this is
Steve's kind of day.
Yeah. So this starts.
What can I say?
This starts in November 1932. On November 2nd, these 3 men, they employed a formation tactic against 50 emus. Now,
this is funny.
They opened
a formation tactic.
Okay, they opened fire. You know, one thing happens. These are not men that they're firing at. These are birds. They go spatting, and they're going all over the place. They didn't kill very many from that time. So then, now this is a smart idea. They decided to set up an ambush at a water source, and they waited. And thousands of emus came to the water source, and they opened fire again. But one of the guns jammed, and so then the emus, they scatter. And, you know, these birds are going to be quick in the way they're going to shift their bodies and jump and everything. So they don't really have a lot of time to shoot these birds. And another issue that they had was if they did hit a bird, that bird would keep running and it may die someplace else. Or the skin was so sharp that if they got grazed by a bullet, did very little harm to them. So this was a really big problem. So by November 8th, they reported that they killed like 300 emus from the 2nd to the 8th. And so it was really considered that the emus won over the men.
Those
because
guys
they could barely
had to be
shoot 'em.
really bad shots, man.
You're just a flightless bird.
You're just okay, but so the men started to withdraw, but the farmers really needed the help, so they did go back until December, and the report came out that they killed from November to December 986 emus, and they assumed that about 2,500 of them were injured and went off and died someplace else. So they were a far cry from the 20,000, and the government decided, you know what, the ammunition that's being used and the results that we're getting, this is not a good idea. So in 1934, so, you know, people were making jokes about this internationally and around Australia. But in 1934, the government decided, you know what we're going to do? We're going to supply the farmers with ammunition. And we're also going to pay 1 shilling as a bounty on the emu. And in 6 months, 57,000 emus.
So it's a lot better when you let the private sector do its job.
That's correct. Now, I will say, I mean, it's just a funny story. When you try to picture it all, it's really quite funny. But the wild emu were formally protected by the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act in 1999. Just so that y'all know.
No more shooting emus.
No more shooting emus.
You can't get back at them.
They fought the birds and the birds won.
That's good. That's it.
They fought the birds and the birds won. It's like an Alfred Hitchcock, except like more
bigger
realistic.
bird.
It's a bigger bird.
Bigger birds.
I don't know if they're good for eating or not, but with that many, it would be.
So Steve, we need to.
We could try them out.
Why don't we do that?
Well,
Let's do a little
Let's
barbecued emu next week.
That sounds good.
I think so.
We'll go find that Liberty bird and we'll toast him up first.
Not the Liberty
He's
bird.
a flightless bird.
Not the Liberty.
Well, I'll be able to get him.
Well, I wonder what eats emu. What's the predator? I wonder.
People.
Because they're flightless.
Well,
Yeah.
in Australia, it probably would be like a crocodile
Or a person.
when they go to the rivers.
Yeah.
They got a huge breast. Got to have good breast meat.
Good.
You would think.
I would imagine it'd be good meat. I
would
wonder.
say so.
You see anyone in the chat, or
Man,
or is your internet crapping out too?
yeah, mine too, man.
Okay. Well, with that said, mine is as well. Let's talk now, moving into the Great Divorce. So, chapter 8. Did y'all read chapter 8 this week, or has it been a week or two?
Yes.
So,
that was a good chapter.
Chapter
Excellent.
8. So, again, for those of you just joining us, the Great Divorce is, in overview, Mr. Producer, it's that next cut, an allegorical representation of heaven and hell, or purgatory, as they might be if final judgment wasn't final, but parole was available, and God allowed the distance of hell to holiday on the edges of heaven. Seeing the beauty and majesty of heaven, would they be wooed by the angelic and glorified representatives of heaven, calling out to them on the edges of what Lewis calls lower heaven? Now, Lewis starts off saying, this is not my view of heaven and hell. Okay. But if it were laid out this way, what pathologies would follow? How would people progress? How would they think? How would they react to God's attempt to woo them even after the grave? And so if you were with us last week, or last time, because we actually took Easter off, thanks to PSB, someone covered us, you know that there was a hard-bitten cynic who frankly did not really understand or believe that you could eventually enter heaven. He kind of had this idea that once you're born, you're destined to suffer and die, and really God had no care or worry. So the narrator, Lewis's placeholder or shoo-in, starts to ask the question, well, heaven is so much more real than I am that even the mist of the spray of the water is like BBs raining. It's like a shotgun blast from a waterfall. These particles are realer than I am, and how could I even live in a heaven? Because heaven is so hostile to man because of man's frailty, because man is just not as firm and as strong as even the blades of grass. And it goes further. You see this kind of witnessed in the book a little bit further. Lewis kind of paints this picture of this other woman who's come up from hell, kind of visiting the edges of heaven, and she sees this, or he sees this unfold, where this woman is walking on the grass, pained by the grass, and being chased or gently pursued by a angelic being or a glorified being, and they reach out and said, "Hey, all you need to do to become firm, to become more real, to become more like heaven."
Yeah, and she's trying to hide.
Is to take my arm and we will walk together into higher heaven. And she goes, but it's painful. I don't want to make the change. I never want to, I don't want to do this and that. And the ghost says, look, we all had to do it. You can come along. She goes, but they'll see how naked I am. They'll see that I am just me. My sin will be bared before everyone. And the heavenly exalted figure says, yeah, I went through that. I had to lay aside all of my shame. I had to say, yes, I was a sinner. But God heals that, fixes that, repairs that, renews that. Everyone will see, in heaven, you will be seen as what you are. And the more like Christ you are, the sooner, the quicker, and again, this is in Lewis's version, you will be able to become more. You'll be more visually appealing, more beautiful. Well, in this case, what Lewis is trying to kind of parse, I believe, and I want y'all's thoughts on this. Lewis is attempting to parse the pride of, I'll go to church when I clean up my life. I'll go to heaven when I clean up my life. And even after the grave, there are people who will always say, I am not ready to change. Just let me change. I'll change on my own terms. Leave me alone. I only want to be left alone.
Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if we listened to the wrong chapter.
We did. But yeah, I think you can answer that fine.
Well, the one thing I really want to bring out here is the question of going to church when you've cleaned yourself up. Can I just say, look at yourself in the mirror and ask, will that ever really happen?
Correct.
Because it's not. It's not going to happen. And that's a really poor excuse. It's a very weak argument for staying home. I will tell you that, as I said earlier, the cross is offensive. Now let me give you the flip side. The cross and the resurrection are comforting. Without the resurrection, you are locked in your despair, in your hopelessness.
Yes.
The cross and the resurrection is what unlocks the door to hope. So for those of you that don't think it's really worth the time to go to church or Bible study because you're not good enough, congratulations. You have ascertained one very important fact. You are not good enough. And here's fact number 2. You never will be.
Correct.
Welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club.
Welcome to reality as God sees it.
Outside of Christ, you are nothing. I am nothing. We are nothing.
We can only boast in God's glory and our salvation through Christ.
So,
amen.
One of the things that I learned very early as a teenager was Christianity compared to other religions, and this is the confusion that many people have, is other religions you have to do to be accepted. In Christianity, Christ did it for you to be accepted. You don't do anything except believe in him. You don't, clean up my life before I go to church. That's you trying to make salvation in your own strength. You have no ability to be saved in your own strength. Christ is the one that says, I did it for you. Just take my hand.
Amen.
I did it for you.
Amen.
Wonderfully said.
That's where we really fall down.
Yeah, I had listened to one of the guys from our church that was filling in for our pastor on a Wednesday night, and he was kind of making an analogy between the church and hospitals. And, you hear people talk about that, pastors do that, how churches like hospitals, hospitals are for the sick and, the same for churches and that sort of thing. And the thing about it is that, you go into a hospital, you're sick. And typically when you come out, majority of the time,
you're better.
You're a whole lot better. And when the church, you go in, you're a sinner. You come out thinking a lot better, but you're still a sinner because you will always be a sinner.
As long as you have this fleshly body.
Exactly.
The second nature.
Always will be until you are in the glory of God.
Correct.
That is the only time that you will never be a sinner. As long as we are continue to live in this old rotten flesh,
correct,
we will always be sinners.
Correct.
Yes.
The only thing the church does for you is help show you the direction and the way to help knock off the dust and to realize the things that you need to do to get to the place that you need to be.
Indeed. Indeed. So, and that's the whole purpose of this life. And I think that's what Lewis is ultimately leading up to is you have an opportunity in time, space, and matter to make a choice. Who will you serve? Choose this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That is the objective of reality. And
Correct.
God, in his kindness, has created this reality for us to live in. But I use the word reality loosely. And I suspect Lewis is onto something when he describes reality as we know it, as something that's a vague shadow. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity, says the teacher in Ecclesiastes. This world is nothing compared to who and what God is, the realm and domain of God. We call that heaven. But and heaven's a complex word. There's an alternative dimension. There's this whole other substance that we don't fully understand, the breadth and depth that we heard about the third heaven, right? Don't really understand if that is, this realm, then the realm above, and then one above that and one above that. We don't understand exactly what that is, but there's something beyond our understanding. And God is trying to woo us in this reality. And I think that's that's the key takeaway. You have to remember, at the end of the day, you have the decision to make.
Yes.
You have the decision to make, and it's not a rotten eggs or rotten fish. It's a rotten eggs or paradise with God.
And real quickly, it's funny that we didn't listen to the right chapter, but you want to know what the chapter was about for us? Did
you listen to chapter 9?
It was free will.
Yeah.
And that's what you're really relating to. It is free will.
Correct.
And it is your choice. And that's the beauty of who God is. He does not make us a robot. He does not force us to worship him. It's a choice.
Yeah.
Right. And some sicknesses are hard to cure.
Yep.
Man, and just like in the hospital, some are difficult, hard to cure, and you go through a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Same with sin.
Absolutely. Every sin has a different level of stronghold. By the way, all sins are created equal, but not all have the same value, impact, or consequence due to the nature of where they are. And that's something that we might actually discuss later on this month. At Further Every Day on YouTube, Rumble. Go ahead and drop your theological questions. Drop some in the chat here. Guys, sorry for the internet issues. We had a little bit of a dropout there.
We had a hiccup.
Final words, Ms. Nicki.
Well, I just think that, we have decoupled ourselves from God in many ways, and people don't care. But I think people do recognize that we don't have the life in our country that we used to have. We don't have the family, the strength of family anymore. We don't have the strength of marriages anymore. So there are consequences for the decisions that we're making.
Correct. Steve?
I think that I agree with Nicki, and one thing that I just kind of like to say is, folks, don't walk on metal roofs when they're wet.
Steve knows all about hospitals. He had a pneumothorax this week since he brought it up. Sucking chest wound.
Yeah,
that's what it's
broken
called.
Ribs, all that good stuff.
Was it open or closed? Was it open or closed?
What's that?
Theirs is closed.
Yeah. So it wasn't a sucking chest wound, but
yeah, it was a closed one. But
those are actually more dangerous. Don't do that.
Man.
Steve knows all about healing.
Yeah,
I don't even know why you're here. I'm glad you're here, but I don't know why.
Praise the Lord. He's amazing.
Praise God.
He's amazing.
I think real quick, just the illustration of the quote unquote thought police. Folks, if you don't think that's something that can happen in America, it already has been attempted.
Stand up now.
Stand up now.
Stand up now. Speak now, or others will speak for you. Speak now, or others will speak for you. And by the way, you're commanded to speak. You're commanded to share the gospel. You're supposed to go forth, preach the gospel to all nations, making disciples, not converts. Disciples means that you actually spend time with people. Ooh. So you mean I can't just preach on the street? I also have to spend time one-on-one with people? That's scary.
Love God, love people.
Love God, love people. And that love means spending time with God and with people. With that said, be about that this week. We love you so much. See you next week.